coronavirus global pandemic of 2020-21 has had a significant effect on language teaching programs. Essentially, lockdown measures have resulted in the cancellation of classes and a switch to online delivery methods. Of course, these are still essentially face-to-face classes, but generally they involve far fewer learners on screen at any one time. 3 people, in my opinion, is a maximum number. Well, this way of working is rather artificial and brings new challenges for language teachers and learners alike. I suspect that there are some people who, like me, have taken up the opportunity to do some volunteer online teaching and are discovering that it is not quite as straightforward as they thought it might be. So in this film, I shall consider some of the factors to be taken into account when planning an online lesson for a group of learners, some of whom may be sharing the screen. I shall revisit some theories of language learning, only a small amount of theory, I assure you. And I shall try to set out some important elements needed to create optimum conditions for developing language skills. First, a key question. What are the purposes of an online language lesson? In a normal classroom lesson, planning would take account of all 4 language skills: listening, speaking, reading, writing. Teachers would be able, for example, to allow reflection time after introducing new grammar or vocabulary, sometimes in a written text. They could also intersperse written exercises with speaking activities. In other words, a wide variety of experiences would help the lesson flow and maintain concentration of the learners at a high level. Time during an online lesson is precious. Anything over an hour is ill-advised because working on screen is far more intensive. So I would suggest that the main focus should be on the spoken language. The emphasis should be on introducing new vocabulary, grammar and syntax through normal communication, illustrating and explaining its purpose and use in spoken language, practicing new forms with appropriate pronunciation and intonation, giving opportunities for the application of new language in relevant contexts. Reading tasks and written exercises can follow the lesson and be the starting point of conversation in the next session. Well, that's how I tend to operate. In a lesson with absolute beginners, the new language will obviously have to be introduced by the teacher. My focus here, however, is on planning for conversation classes from a post-beginner level upwards. While it is always good to plan a topic in advance, you should try to use the personal experiences of the learners to guide the content of the lesson. It is important to get to know what the learners' real lives are like, what they enjoy doing, what they find easy, what they find difficult, what they hope to achieve, and so on. When talking about students' likes and dislikes, initially, all you may get is a basic answer.
I like science, I like music, I don't like gymnastics.
The first step, therefore, is to add more items to the likes and dislikes list. This can be done best by using pictures or photos. It doesn't matter how basic these are as long as they convey the meaning clearly. By expanding learners' vocabulary here, we are responding to that first stage of the plan. Introducing new vocabulary, grammar and syntax through normal communication. The second task can be extending that level of language to more natural conversation by adding variety and more nuanced meaning to these exchanges. I like science.
I enjoy studying science.
I like music.
I am very fond of music.
I don't like gymnastics.
I'm not keen on gymnastics.
Thirdly, they could add reasons, adding their own response to the question, why? Why not? Because,
The lessons are interesting.
because,
I find it easy.
because,
It is important for my future.
because,
I want to study it at university.
because,
It is part of my ambitions for the future.
because,
There will be a good career for me.
because,
Culture is an important part of life.
because,
It helps me relax.
because.
I prefer to do practical things.
We are actually helping our learners understand better how the sentences of normal speech are constructed. This is indeed the second element of our plan, illustrating and explaining the language's purpose and use in speech, in normal conversation. You can introduce more emphasis by using adverbs, and this is where words such as really, actually, in fact, really come into their own. It's at this point you need visual support for the explanation of the word's location in the sentence. I want to study science at university.
I really want to study science at university. In fact, I really want to study science at university.
Eventually, you can set up short model exchanges, which can be practiced. We are now at the third planning element stage, practicing new forms with appropriate pronunciation and intonation. These dialogues should be short enough to fit on a whiteboard or to be printed large on an A4 sheet. What would you say is your favourite subject?
I enjoy studying science.
Really?
Yes, I do. In fact, I want to study science at university.
Oh, okay. Why?
Because, well, actually, I want to become an engineer.
Even effecting slight changes in the practice dialogue can require learners to stretch their linguistic skills further. You can do this step by step. For example, by providing just the skeleton of a similar dialogue. Here's one. It is not always possible to reach the goal of having a free-flow, natural conversation during a single lesson, but we should always aim to reach our fourth element in our planning. That is the stage at which we are giving learners the chance to apply their newly acquired language in relevant contexts. One way which we could do this in terms of the content so far is by switching the topic from school subjects, for example, to sports or other spare time activities. This time, trying without the support of the written text. Another important strategy is to switch roles, making the learners take the lead, imposing the questions and taking the conversation forward. If you remain silent, you give time for learners to think and bring the recently introduced language into action in a more independent way. A final word about accuracy and fluency. Making mistakes is an integral part of learning. We have all heard of the saying, learning by trial and error. This also applies to learning a new language. But teachers need to avoid the temptation to correct every mistake that learners make. One way to do this is, in your planning, to create specific times when you definitely will not correct errors. You will remain silent, allowing total freedom for learners to try to communicate, offering support only when asked. Give them fluency time. It does take some discipline on the part of teachers. Believe me, I know, because I'm a bit of an accuracy freak. So here's what an hour-long conversation class might look like, with key teaching purposes identified, the timings, and whether the focus is on accuracy and or fluency. This actually was a real lesson. The topic was likes and dislikes, and my pro forma here gives the main elements of the lesson, including the phasing, whether it was introductory, explanation, practice or application of the language, whether the focus of the activity was on accuracy or fluency, and approximate timings. First, a quick review of homework tasks. Clearly, accuracy is important here. Then some important reminders. Let me pause and explain what I mean here. In my very first lesson, during a recent volunteer teaching experience, one student said, "Repeat the question." Well, that's fine, I thought. Her meaning is clear, so I repeated the question. But then I taught her and the other students a range of more polite ways of making such a request. Direct but less rude.
Repeat the question, please.
Polite.
Could you please repeat the question?
Very polite.
Would it be possible for you to repeat the question, please?
After lots of practice during the lesson, the homework that week was to complete the following grid. It is important to establish these ways of communicating in the class time from the start. They will need these phrases, or a variation of them, in real life too, not just in the artificial world of classroom lessons. They are lifelong skills. So I like starting from the simple premise that whatever interactions that take place during a language class should, wherever possible, be useful outside the lesson. So now let's get back to that lesson plan. The third stage. The fourth stage, adding the vocabulary. The fifth stage, practice, focus. The sixth stage, more practice with less support. This final stage of the lesson is where students are given free rein. They are encouraged to try their new language out, to apply it, and have a fluency opportunity with minimal correction from the teacher. Of course, this is only one approach to planning, but I hope it has given you some ideas for developing your own schemes. You will need to be flexible and, of course, adapt your planning to suit the specific needs of your learners. Yes, indeed, flexibility and adaptability are essential. Communication is unpredictable. That's what makes language teaching so interesting and so much fun. Thank you for watching.